Excellent.
There you go. Good luck.
Thanks.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Roy Gerber, the volunteer race director for Cincinnati Harbor Mini Marathon 16, and I want to welcome all of you to the clinic. As most of you know, the purpose of the Cincinnati Harbor Mini Marathon is to raise funds for the American Heart Association. It's also to promote image and awareness of the American Heart Association, and thirdly, obviously to encourage aerobic exercise like walking and running. Relative to that first goal, raising funds for the Heart Association, we've been very successful this year. As some of you may know, this is really three events in one. It's the Dance for Heart, which is going on as we speak, Heart Walk 93, and then of course the 9.3 race on Sunday. We have raised, it looks like, about $200,000 this year, so we're real proud of that. We want to thank all of the volunteers, and there are obviously too many to mention, but we have a tremendous amount of volunteers on all the different committees that help put this whole event together. And then, of course, on Sunday, we're going to use about another 400 volunteers. So if you see these people, they're wearing blue shirts. If you see them, thank them. If you're anaerobic and you can't talk, just kind of give them a wave, and they'll appreciate that. I am very honored to be able to introduce to you one of America's all-time great track and field athletes, Mary Decker Slaney. Mary was born in Flemington, New Jersey. She ran her first race at age 14, and by age 15, she became the youngest U.S. runner ever to compete internationally. Over Mary's competitive career, which now exceeds 20 years, Mary has broken 16 American records in every event from the half mile up to the 10,000 meters, 6.2 miles. And she's also broken 7 world records. This is an unprecedented achievement in terms of the absolute number of records, the span of distances over which those records were achieved, and the number of years in which Mary has been competing at the world-class level. Mary won the gold medal in the 1,500 meters and the 3,000 meters at the World Championships in Helsinki. She's won the Mercedes Mile, the Sydney Road Race, the 1,500 and the 3,000 at the '84 Olympic Trials in Indianapolis, and really on and on and on. Mary's been honored with just about every award you could give a runner. She's won the Sullivan Award, which is given to the most outstanding amateur athlete. She's won the Steve Prefontaine Award, given to the most outstanding track and field athlete. She's been named the Athlete of the Year by Track and Field News, Sportswoman of the Year by Sports Illustrated, just every award you can think of. Mary's been living in Eugene, Oregon since 1978. She's married to Richard Slaney. Richard is the British record holder in the discus, and they are the proud parents of a 6-year-old daughter. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mary Decker Slaney.
Thanks. It's nice to be here, and I want to thank the Heart Association for bringing me here. However, a lot of people have asked me what my goals for this particular race are, and to be perfectly honest, I'm not going to run the full distance tomorrow, and that is because I've just come off of an injury once again. This one's a little less serious than most of my injuries. I fell down on the ice in Eugene, of all places. We never get snow, we never get ice, and it snowed. And we had ice, and I was determined to keep training because I wanted to run indoor season this year. So I went out for a run, I slipped, I fell, and I have what I call my first football injury because I hurt my crucial tibial anterior ligament behind my knee. And that's something that I'm told that a lot of football players get. And that put an end to my indoor season, but it also has set me back as far as where I want it to be at this point. I don't know that I still would have raced a 15K, but I would have certainly run a hard effort through the whole distance. However, where I'm at now for this particular run is I'm going to run 4 to 5 miles at a hard pace, probably somewhere between, I'd say, 5:05, 5:15, the 4 to 5 miles, depending on the course. I don't know the course. I know it's hilly, so that pace can vary, 5 seconds either way, depending on the course. I mean, most of you have an advantage over me that you are from here, and you probably have run this event before and do know the course, so that makes a difference. And then I'll probably jog another couple of miles to warm down, and then watch all of you finish. So, anyway, my future, you've heard about stuff I've done over the years running, and I have to say that I've loved every minute of it. I've always loved running. I've hated injuries, but I've always had injuries. But I think that my love for running exceeds my hate for the injuries. That's why I'm still doing it. My future goals, my immediate goals, racing-wise, my first race of this year will be next weekend. I plan to run a 5K in Carlsbad, California. I'm told it's a fast course, it's flat, so that's good for a track runner. Stuttgart, West Germany is the site for the Outdoor World Championships in track and field this year. The qualifying meet for that is mid-June, which is our national championships, and I plan to be on that team this year to compete in Stuttgart. So that is my goal for the year, is to make it to the World Championships, and I would like to run both the 15 and 3,000 because that would mark my 10th anniversary from the 83 World Championships. So that's sort of a personal goal of mine that I've set for myself. When I started running, I was 11 when I started. I started competing internationally when I was 14, and the first team I was on was an AAU senior team. I was 14, and the next youngest person, I believe, was 17 or 18. I made a lot of friends, a lot of guys that probably, well, and women, but mostly, it seemed like mostly men I remember, like Al Feuerbach and Mac Wilkins and Steve Prefontaine. I met him on that trip, and he was very inspirational to me. In fact, during that trip, we were away for 6 weeks, and Steve, for some reason, took me under his wing. I don't know if it was he was protecting me from the overdrive syndrome or the burnout syndrome that a lot of young athletes go through, but I got home, and he started calling my house every week to check up on my training, to make sure I wasn't overtraining, to make sure I wasn't racing too much, and in fact, that's how I got involved with Nike. When Nike first started, he was involved with Nike. His coach was Bill Bowerman, who made the waffle on the waffle iron. So there's a lot of history there. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that I've gained a lot through my early years of running. However, because I love running, because I was never pushed into it by parents or by coaches, I always did as much as I could whenever I could. And that probably wasn't always the best thing. In fact, I ran my one and only marathon when I was 12 years old. And you laugh at that, but it gets even funnier because I went out to run this marathon, and the furthest I'd ever run before that was 12 miles in training. In fact, that's the furthest I've ever run in training ever, to date. It was 12 miles. And I went out a course, the Palos Verdes Peninsula course, which I don't believe this marathon's in existence any longer. And this must have been in 1970 or 71. And I remember people being very skeptical that I couldn't understand why. I thought, well, I love running. This is, a long race, a great race. I ran it, and I remember the last 6 miles being the hardest thing I'd ever done. 3 of the last 6 miles were uphill, and I finished this race. I ran 3 hours, 9 minutes, and 27 seconds. I never remember times, but I remember that time. It made an impression. And however, the next day I went to a track meet. This was on a Saturday. The next day I went to a track meet where my team was competing, the girls' track club that I belonged to. I wasn't supposed to compete. However, they were a person short for a relay. So I got to anchor a relay and run a quarter. Well, I've never been so sore in my life. I was so sore that next day. So I run this quarter, I train through the week, and the next weekend comes, and I go to a track meet, and I'm entered in an 800, a mile, and a 2 mile, all on the same day. Well, I ran the 800, I ran the mile, and halfway through the 2 mile I had to drop out. And I had never dropped out of anything. I mean, I had only been running a short time at this point, but I had never dropped out of anything, so it was very difficult for me to make the decision to drop out. However, I had extreme stomach pains, which I'd never had that before either. And I went home that evening, and my mother ended up taking me to the hospital at 1 o'clock in the morning. I had acute appendicitis and had my appendix out within an hour because they were about to burst. And the doctor said, well, I think this was brought on by stress. So this leads me to believe that I did not have the best coaching in the world at that age. The coaches that we had for these girls' track clubs were all volunteer coaches, which it's great for them to give their time and their energy and their effort and to take an interest. However, it doesn't make for the most knowledgeable and the best coaches. So you take an athlete like myself that obviously has some natural talent, and you apply the proper coaching and the proper guidance, you're going to end up probably with a longer span career and better results, less injuries, and no appendicitis attacks in the middle of the night. Anyway, my early coaching obviously wasn't that great. And as I've gotten older in the sport, I have learned that nutrition is also very important. Well, along with the lack of knowledgeable coaching, when you're young, and even today, youngsters, I run with a lot of college guys. My coach right now is Bill Dellinger, who is the men's coach at the University of Oregon. So I have the opportunity to train and run with a lot of these college guys. I go to some of their meetings because he'll plot out workouts and do these graphs and show everybody what his training philosophy and plan is for the season. And he will also talk about nutrition because college guys have a notorious habit of eating too much junk food, hamburgers, pizza, drinking too much beer. And I always feel a little bit conspicuous sitting in these meetings because he says, well, you guys aren't going to feel this now, but in 5 or 10 years you're going to be happy that you didn't do too much of this stuff. And I sit there because I know exactly what he's talking about, and they all look at me. It's like, I feel very old around these guys. They seem very young, but I can't stress enough to the young people in this room that to get on a good nutritional program, and I'm not talking about making sure that you take lots of vitamins and making sure that you only eat certain things, but eat good things. If you have a choice between fruit and a Twinkie, obviously you should eat the fruit, or fruit and cookies, you should eat the fruit. There are times when I get sugar cravings, and yes, I'll eat something junky every once in a while. I can tell you that from the time I was in high school until we had our baby, which she's not a baby any longer, she's almost 7, I had never stepped into a McDonald's. I mean, that kind of food just doesn't appeal to me. And now I have to go to McDonald's sometimes. It's like, I actually have gotten over this phase, but I was embarrassed to go to McDonald's for a long time in my town. Eugene, Oregon is a small town, and people see you there and they can't believe that they see you there ordering McDonald's. And the good thing is they have salads now, so parents that must go, keep that in mind. It helps. Getting back to the coach thing, I've had a lot of coaches over the years, and this applies to any age, whether you're 10 years old starting out or 30 or 40 or 50 years starting out. You need to find a coach that you get along with personality-wise, because I've known a lot of athletes that have worked with a lot of different coaches where their personalities just conflict, and nobody gets anywhere. I mean, there's just too much animosity and too many emotional things going on. And when I say that you need someone that you can trust, you need to know about their program, their coaching philosophies, what they expect from their athletes, and you have to believe that this is going to work for you. I have been through several coaches myself over the years, and some coaches I feel have been much better for me than others. most of my coaches over the years have always felt this need to control me. And when I say control me, they control your workouts, they control your races, but also they try to control your life. They control your schedule, they want to tell you when you can go someplace, where you should go, and that's when I got into problems as far as personality goes. The man that I work with now, he's a former Olympian in distances. He's been a very successful collegiate coach for a very long time. In fact, he should be retiring soon. He has any ambition to do anything else. But he also lets me be myself, and he works with me. You need to have a coach that's going to work with you, respect your ambitions, your goals, and try to adjust his training philosophies to fit your goals. And for me, he doesn't work with women. He's only worked with one other woman athlete ever, and that was back in '84. He coached Julie Brown, who was a marathoner. And since then, I'm the only woman he's ever worked with. And he believes in me as an athlete, and that's important because I've also worked with a coach that has actually said to me in print that you've run fast enough, you don't need to run any faster, so we don't need to do any different workouts. Well, for someone that's as competitive as I am, it was very difficult for me to want to continue working with this person. I mean, I wanted to improve. I still want to improve. I still want to run faster. I run 4:16 in the mile, but, I want to run 4:10. I'd like to run 4 minutes for a mile. I don't think you should ever put limits on yourself, and I think that whoever you work with as a coach needs to realize that they can't put the limits on you either, that they need to coach you to reach your potential. And everybody's potential is different. And one of the reasons I'm still running and training and hoping to go to the Olympics and be successful is because I personally do not feel like I've reached my potential. Sure, I've broken some records and I've run some good times and I've won the world championships, but I don't think that's ultimately my potential. And that, I think, stems back to when I first started running. I started running and I idolized all these milers, Jim Ryan, Herb Elliott, back in the early 70s, John Walker, when he won in Montreal. And I was fortunate enough to actually become friends and meet John Walker after that in '77. And ever since then, I thought, I have this dream. And nobody has to know what your dreams are. I mean, that's between you and your dreams. But I have a dream, and I think that it keeps me inspired. I dream about what I think I can do and what I will do someday athletically. And people will say to me, well, you've been injured so much, you've had so many down times as far as running goes. But I've never reached my potential, I've never accomplished this dream, and I have to keep going. It's my inspiration. And I think that whatever you do, whether it's running, business, raising your family, I mean, you have a dream. I have a dream for my daughter, I have dreams, and I probably will have more children, but you have dreams and you have to try and fulfill those dreams. You will have a dream until you die, is my philosophy. So you will always be trying to achieve something. As far as the sport itself, there's been a lot of advances since I started running. And the advances are, when I first started running, I would go out for runs and people would look at me like I was a freak, this girl out running in running clothes. And now it's very popular, very fashionable to be fit and go out running. Also, a lot of the advantages that have occurred over the last 10 years, equipment has gotten a lot better, the shoes, the tracks, doctors have gotten a lot better. And I don't know if there's any doctors in this room, but in the early years when an athlete got injured, you'd go to the normal doctors and the cure for everything was rest. Okay, you want to get better? Take 6 weeks off. Take 6 months off and you'll get better. But if you have a structural problem or a mechanical problem, as soon as you start running again, the problem's going to come back. So now, there are so many orthopedic doctors and general physicians that specialize in sports medicine that you can go to a knee guy or a foot guy or somebody that specializes in lower legs. And more than not, you're going to get the answer to your problem, or at least a lot closer than you would have 10, 15, 20 years ago. Also, as far as physicians go, last year I had a problem with my iron, and I don't know why. Probably because I'm a little bit older, and I've been told that once you get over 30, you start having these little subtle problems. And I didn't know I had a problem with my iron. I went to several of my general doctors, just my general physician, a few other doctors that were supposed to be tops in their field, and general disorders, and nobody could find anything wrong. So of course, it makes you feel like a hypochondriac. You go out to work out and you have no energy. You're sitting there next to the track feeling like, something's wrong. But then you have these doctors saying, oh, there's nothing wrong. So then, without them actually saying it, you say to them, well, is it in my head? Because that's what they're implying. But normally it's not. Most top-level athletes, when they feel like something's wrong, something is wrong, and it could be something very subtle. Something that a lot of doctors aren't going to pick up on, but there are physicians now that do specialize in sports and specialize in people that are very active. And my problem, I went to an endocrinologist, he did all these blood tests, and he took a lot of blood, but he found the problem, and it was just a simple iron problem. I started taking a certain iron supplement, and within a month, I was feeling normal again. So that's just a small example of that sort of thing. I could go on and on about injuries, but I don't want to bore you. I think what I'd like to do, instead of standing here and just going on talking, I'd like to get some input from all of you and find out what you'd like to know. I'll try to answer the questions you have the best I can from my experiences and people that I've known. However, I'm not a distance runner per se, as far as, the furthest I've really raced is 10K. So keep that in mind when you want to know about marathoning. I don't really know about marathoning, but I'd like to get some questions.
What has kept you motivated the most over the years?
The question is, what has kept me motivated the most over the years? And the answer to that is I've never had a problem being motivated to run. When I go out to the track or I go out for a run, it's because I get to do it. And I think part of that philosophy or that feeling comes from the fact that I've been injured so many times and prevented from doing what I want to do athletically so many times that I feel like I'm actually getting to do something when I'm healthy and can train and can run well. Also, I have goals. I have time goals that I've never, that I haven't gotten close to yet, that I think keeps me reaching for it. And also because I've been injured so much, a lot of people, I don't know that I feel this personally, but a lot of people feel that, well, if you had been as successful as you wanted to be, 10 years ago or 5 years ago, maybe you'd have stopped running. But I've always loved running, and I can't see myself not running. I can see myself not competing someday, but I can't see myself not running because I think I'll always run at least for fitness. And physically and emotionally, I feel better when I can be active, and I've done it for such a large part of my life that it would be such a lifestyle change not to.
What was your training schedule like when you were pregnant? I'm really interested in other women you might have spoken with about what their training is like.
Okay, my training schedule when I got pregnant with Ashley was, I tried to maintain a normal training schedule for as long as I could, meaning that I would do the same quantity of workouts, the same kind of workouts, but I kept my heart rate at a certain level. And that's what the doctor recommended. He said, because you are so active and you've been so active, you can maintain what you're doing, but you have to be aware of not going into oxygen debt, because then you're depriving the baby of oxygen. So that was my main concern. So I went out and did hills and intervals and everything I normally would do. And I made it through about 7 months like that. And then I started having some really bad cramping lower in my stomach. And in the end, I found out why, but at the time, I didn't know why. And so I maintained a running program right up until the day before I delivered. But I wasn't able to like go out for a run. I had to run for like a half mile and stop and walk and run and walk and run and walk. But it was better than nothing. And then the other things I added to supplement that while I was pregnant, I rode the Life Cycle, a stationary bicycle. I lifted light weights, and I ran in the water. And the stuff in the water, I think, was probably the most beneficial because I could do it for the longest period of time and there was no weight-bearing problems. And then other people that I've known, runners that have been pregnant, they've been able to maintain a running schedule, running 5, 6 miles, even further up through delivery. However, they just run very, very slow. It depends on how you're carrying your pregnancy. Every pregnancy seems to be a little bit different, and I think it's very individual.
You have a reputation of being a notoriously fierce trainer. How do you keep yourself in check? How do you know that you're not overtraining? What are the signs that you go through?
Well, how do you keep yourself in check and not overtrain? You're right, I am notorious for being an overtrainer. And part of that problem is that once I get fit and I start running well, and feeling good while I'm running, if I go out for an easy run, say I have a hard track workout or a hard day, then the next day or two are supposed to be easy efforts to recover between the hard sessions. Well, my coach will say, well, just go for 6 to 8 miles today, easy. And I'll go out and maybe 6-minute pace is easy. And I'll come back and he'll say, well, what'd you do yesterday? Oh, 8 miles at 6-minute pace. And he'll say, that's not easy. And, well, it was easy, it was fine. And my biggest problem is that when I do get fit and I'm running, it's not a hard effort for me to do something like that, but my lower legs think it's a hard effort. My Achilles tendons, my calves, all the things that I have injury problems with don't recover. It's not my cardiovascular system or the rest of me, it's my injury-prone areas. So now, in my later years, so to speak, I'm supposed to be a little bit wiser. And I keep telling myself that when I go out for a run and start running too fast, then I slow down. I try to keep my slow runs 6:20 to 6:30 pace. And then if I'm really tired, even a little bit slower than that. I've gone for runs with Alberto Salazar, and he's specifically gone out with me on my easy days to make me run 7-minute pace. So it's even hard now for me to keep myself from overtraining in that respect. I go out to the track and my coach will say, okay, well, we're going to do intervals today and I want you to hit 30 seconds on these 200s, no faster. And I'll start running and 28s are easy. So I get into this rhythm where 28s are easy. And, it's like, I don't want to run 30s, I want to run 28s, So it's still difficult, and for me, it's always a battle. I have this 6'7", 310-pound husband that's always trying to keep me from overtraining. In fact, last night I spoke to him on the phone. Okay, well, how far do you run? How fast you run? Well, that's too far. That's too fast. It's a constant battle. But I am conscious of it, and I think that's the most important thing. Anybody in this room that has a problem with overtraining or training too hard too often is, if you're conscious of it and you know that it's a problem, it's easier to deal with. It's easier to keep yourself from doing it.
Do you find that now that you think you're getting older, do you have to stretch more, do more, and get ready to run than you did before?
Well, I think it's probably true. Do I have to stretch more? Do I have to basically warm up more before I get ready to run? And an example of that is I get to the track at least 30 minutes before I start my workout. And the college guys, they turn up, 10 minutes before they start their workout. So I think that's a good example as to me warming up as opposed to a younger person. When I was in college, I used to be able to go out the door in Colorado. I went to school in Colorado in the snow and start running, 6:10, 6-minute pace. in the morning. I couldn't do that now safely. I mean, I could probably do it aerobically, but as far as my Achilles tendons, my calves, and all the things I've had surgery on over the years, it wouldn't be safe. So part of the reason I go and I stretch more and I take more time to warm up is more out of safety than necessity as far as the way I feel. I think it's a preventative thing as far as injuries go.
What do you eat in a normal day, or what are your eating habits like?
What are my eating habits like? What do I eat in a normal day? For me, I get up and I have a very light breakfast. I'll have toast or bagels or something like that, cereal, raisin bran. I'll have coffee. That's one of my biggest vices is I like coffee. I drink too much coffee as far as the caffeine goes. And then I'll go out for an easy run after my daughter's gone to school. And then I try to eat an early lunch around between 11 and 11:30, and normally it's some sort of sandwich, soup, or a pasta. I don't eat a heavy lunch because if I eat too much for lunch or too heavy, like meat and just something heavy, I have a hard time in the afternoon when I go to work out. I don't feel as good. I feel sluggish if I eat heavy food at lunchtime. So I do eat my biggest meal at the end of the day, which isn't the best way. If you're exercising to lose weight, that's not the best way to do it. You should eat your biggest meal in the middle of the day and have a light meal at the end of the day. But for me, because of my training schedule, I'll eat my dinner as my biggest meal. And for dinner, we eat normal food. I don't eat anything, I don't just eat pasta or just eat fish, or we'll have red meat every once in a while. We don't eat it all the time just because we don't like to eat it all the time. I think we eat fairly healthy. I think I'm more aware of what I'm eating simply because, I'm older. I want to continue my career as long as I can athletically, but also I'm aware of what my daughter's eating. I want to make sure she's eating plenty of fruits and vegetables and grains, all the healthy stuff. And as a result of that and our eating habits, she's a very healthy eater, and she's healthier than any other child that I know. And I think that's a clear-cut example of teaching someone to eat well early in life. Either. When you first started running, did you have any female role models? When I first started running, did I have any female role models? The only female role model that I've ever had athletically was Babe Diedrichson, because I read about her at school, and you do your book reports and stuff. There weren't that many female track and field athletes, especially in the distances, to look up to. So that's why all the books and all the information was written about the Herb Elliots and the Milers, and so that's pretty much how I learned about track and field.
Does your daughter run?
Does my daughter run? She doesn't run competitively. She'll come out to the track, she'll jog around the track, she'll do exercises. She's more interested in doing step aerobics. She likes to go to the track to play on the pole vault pit and in the sand pit more than anything. It's actually quite funny. I'll be doing a workout with all these guys, and she'll be on the pole vault pit yelling, "Yay, go mommy," during a workout, and all these guys will just start laughing. So then I start laughing, and it's not good for the workout.
When you're running, do you critique yourself mentally? Do you like to run through a checklist with your feet, your knees in the right position, and if you do you like to run through it?
Do I critique myself mentally while I'm running? Positioning. Actually, I don't, because that's the one good gift that I've gotten naturally, I think, is that I've been told I have good form. So I don't ever work on my form. I don't really notice how I'm running specifically. Sometimes my arms will feel tight or my shoulders will feel tight, and I try to physically or mentally untighten them, shake them out or whatever. But as far as actual form or the way my feet are hitting the ground or my knees or whatever, I don't really think about it. And part of that's because running for me just feels very natural. and it always has. And I think that's part of the reason that I really like it, and I've been doing it for so long, because I don't have to alter it.
Do you do any upper body workouts?
Do I do any upper body workouts now? Yes, and that's only as of recent. I've started doing a lightweight program 3 times a week, and it's specifically for upper body stuff. And my husband designed the program for me. I mean, he's a former discus thrower. He's lifted weights all his life, so. And I hate the weight room, I have to say. You know, that's probably, I've never done it before because it's something that I don't enjoy. And I've grown to enjoy it a lot more over the last few months, simply because he will go with me and we do this workout together. And it's gotten to the point now where I kind of whiz through this little workout he's given me, and he takes too long. You know, it's, these weight guys, they just take too long. You know, they take all this rest between repetitions and stuff, but it's made it more fun for me, and I think that ultimately it will help me.
Can you go over some more cautions for 14-year-old runners?
Cautions for
Precautions they should take.
precautions. Got to think back here to 14. Well, the number one thing is to find a good coach. Number 2, I think, is that if you're a young athlete starting out or continuing, that you're doing it for the right reasons. Because I've known a lot of young athletes that are so pressured into running or competing because it's something their parents or their teacher or somebody at school wants them to do. You have to be doing it for the right reasons. I think it's imperative that you don't overtrain early. I mean, I know that I have done that, and it could have contributed to some of my lower leg problems. To get the proper shoes, which a lot of times I used to train barefoot, you know, and you're training without any support whatsoever. And have just the proper guidance. I think that young athletes should not be forced into doing things that they're not ready to do. A lot of the things I overdid and did when I was young, I did because I loved the sport so much. And to me, if you have an athlete like that, that is so obsessive and likes the sport so much and feels like they have so much to gain from the sport, then it's the job or the job of the coach or the parent to step back and look at them and, you know, withdraw them a little bit from that. Because I've seen too many athletes that are great in high school, great in college, and they fall apart as soon as they get out of school. You know, there's all this expectations, there's all these things written about them. There's been a lot of athletes over the years that go through their college career, and I've read things that, well, this is the next Mary Decker. And to me, that's offensive to me simply because I feel like if there's going to be a next me, then I should be gone. You know, it's like, and I'm not ready to be gone. And also, I think it's offensive to the younger athletes because it puts a certain amount of pressure on them to perform at a certain level, but also it's not giving them their own identity. You know, they need to form their own identity. And an athlete that has had a lot of problems with this specific sort of thing is Vicki Huber, who was second in the Olympic trials in '88 in the 3,000, and she ran very well, and she has, I believe, the second fastest time by another American other than myself in the 3,000. After the '88 Olympics, she was compared to me so much. She was, I mean, people said, well, Vicki should have and would have beat Mary, and she's going to go to Europe next year and break world records and be undefeated, and she just couldn't deal with it mentally. She had like an emotional breakdown. And I think that's something that if you do have a good athlete, a young athlete, that you have to be sensitive to those pressures. Pressure's a tough thing.
Have you ever thought about moving up to the marathon in the future?
Have I ever thought about moving up to the marathon in the future? Right now, I do think about moving up to the 5,000 and 10,000. In fact, for '96, I don't know if I would be running a 3,000 or a 10,000. There is no 5,000 yet for women. As far as a marathon goes, yes, I'd love to run a marathon someday competitively and have trained for it. My husband thinks I'm crazy because I'm so injury prone. He thinks that if I start doing more miles and doing more training for a marathon, that I'm just asking for trouble. But on the other hand, when I think about it, training for a marathon, the workouts aren't as intense as training for middle distances. You do a lot more intense stuff on the track, training for 1500s, miles, and 3000s. So in my mind, it seems like somewhere there's a balance there. So if I do decide to run longer, I won't be doing the same intensity, so I can do it safely. And yet, I mean, I would like to have the opportunity to do that, but that won't be at least until after 96.
What was your highest point and lowest point in running?
My highest point in running and my lowest point in running. My highest point probably was winning the 3,000 and 1,500 meter double at Helsinki. My lowest point obviously was laying on the infield in '84 at the LA Coliseum at the Olympics.
Do you train all year round, and do you ever use a treadmill?
Do I train all year round, and do I ever use a treadmill? Yes, I train all year round, and that's part of the reason I live in Eugene, Oregon, because we don't have the harsh climate conditions normally. Now, January 10th, when I fell down, we did have ice and snow. However, that's not normal, and a lot of distance runners do live in Oregon for that reason, that the climate is temperate enough that you can train all year round. As far as using a treadmill, I did try that about 3 years ago when we had a little bit of snow, and because of my style of running, I was running a little bit differently, and I hurt my calf running on the treadmill, because I'd get on the treadmill thinking, well, I'm going to do the same workout I'd do if I went out for a run, and that's the wrong attitude, I think, on a treadmill. I think if you have to run on a treadmill, that you should just do it and think, you know, this is a good exercise. It's not to run 6-minute pace or 5:30 pace. Just do it to get an easy run in.
With the demise of the Eastern Bloc, are you comfortable your competitors are going to be not
Clean?
Yeah.
With the demise of the Eastern Bloc, am I confident that my competitors are going to be clean? Meaning, are they not going to be taking drugs? No, I'm not confident of that. I think the problem is becoming less all the time, but I think the problem is still there, and I think there's a problem in this country, to be honest. I mean, I couldn't sit here and tell you who and what and where, but I think there's a problem here, and I think there's a problem in other Western countries, not just the Eastern Bloc. I think for the Eastern Bloc, as far as drugs and steroids go, it's going to be less accessible to them through the government, because in Romania and Russia and East Germany, drugs were accessible through the coaches, and you know, the programs were done through the government supplemented things that they do with them early on, and that no longer will exist. But they have more freedom, so they'll be able to obtain stuff, you know, when they're on trips, you know, other ways, because they're allowed to talk to us now. You know, before all of this freedom stuff happened, they weren't allowed to talk to us at meets. You'd go to a meet and you wouldn't talk to the East Germans or the Russians unless there were absolutely no official type people around.
Could you describe the mental pressures you face before a run, and maybe how you deal with it?
The mental pressures that I face before a run, and maybe how I deal with them. The mental pressures, obviously, the more important the event, the greater the pressure is. For example, Olympic trials, or Olympics, or World Championships. The way that I have found to most effectively deal with the pressure is to try and treat it as if it's just another race. Now that's very difficult, and a lot of the pressure is not pressure that is internally or comes from yourself or people closest to you, but from the media and expectations of other people. So the way I deal with that is I don't read anything anymore. I mean, I was talking to Roy, and he was talking about track and field news or Runner's World or something the other day, and you know, I haven't read track and field news or Runner's World probably in 8 years. You know, I just don't do it. And as far as newspaper articles, I just don't read them. I mean, and that all started after '84 because there was so much stuff written, and I would say that probably 80% of it was untrue. that it made it much more difficult for me to deal with it on a daily basis by reading stuff. So I just didn't. And you have to feel comfortable with yourself. You have to feel comfortable with what your family, your coach, your friends, people that are close to you know and feel to be able to do that. But that's how I deal with that sort of pressure.
Do you have an 800 interval workout with rest periods, just briefly?
An 800 interval workout with rest periods. Let me think for a second. Well, when I've trained specifically for 800 meters, an example of a workout is that I did a lot of 300s in, I'm trying to think the times, 44 to 45 with a 100-meter jog, like 12 of those, that sort of thing. But also when it got closer, after doing all the strength workout that I specifically did for 1,500 and 3,000, the workout that I remember most before I ran 156.9 was I went to the track and my coach had me run a 600 at just about an all-out effort. I ran a 600 in 125, and then I think I had 3 minutes rest, and then I ran a 400 as I think it was about 58. The 400 was really hard after running a 125, 600, and that's all I did that day was just those 2 intervals. And 3 days later, I ran 156.9. And I was disappointed because I went through the 600 1 second slower than I'd done that workout in. But that was specifically a workout to get you to run the pace before you actually ran the race. Do I have certain things I always do the day before a race or right before a race? Yes, I do. I always shave my legs the day of a race because it makes me feel faster. When I compete, I eat 4 hours prior to an event, and it's always either pasta or potatoes, some sort of carbohydrate because I don't like that heavy feeling. And I just feel lighter. I mean, it's probably a lot in my head, but that's how I've always done it. I like to do nothing before I compete. If I have an event coming up and it's at home, having a young child, Richard will take Ashley out for the day so that I can do nothing. And I'll just watch TV or I get up and I go for like a 2 or 3 mile jog in the morning if I have the